okay? Because and that is my father's social capital. It's almost like his, middle finger at the world. And that's how important the credential is. And yet we're still at this stage. The credential is not necessarily recognized within a country, let alone from one country to the next. Please keep that as the basis of what you want to get done. If you manage to get something done about verifiable credentials, you would have achieved quite a lot, I would suggest. And I can bore you to tears about this at some other stage. Okay. So the education institutions. And what we had tried to do at the time, that we started looking at, okay, here's if we want to use technology to transform TVET, how do these things push each other? What do we mean by digital transformation and the way it interacts with TVET? Okay. And inevitably, as soon as you start looking at digital transformation, you inevitably start to engage with issues related to policies, to governance, to policy development, to social dialogue, to money, to equity. Is this important for a particular country or not? Let alone then, this is where we can get to again, the interoperability problem, the quality and relevance of the TVET which is being served. So here you start looking at things like learning processes, the quality of the staff, the qualification systems, even the quality of those qualification systems, the learning pathways, the quality assurance regimes, the information which all of these institutions, because inevitably, I'm afraid, it is always an institution. So there are people hiding behind the institution who do all of this hugely important work, let alone we're leaving the word of guidance, helping people who think that, I was born in the wrong place at the wrong time and there's nothing in it for me. That's the whole idea about, how we can get from digital transformation and these essential elements of TVET, and how can we go from a concept of digital transformation to actual innovation, to doing something groundbreaking, which is what you're expected to do, to the whole idea of how do you adapt and accelerate that transformation. In other words, here you are, it's almost like a train from the start. You just got onto the train. How can you get to the 2030 goal, which I understand, those KPIs that have been set in front of you, and you need to do something about? I started trying to look at this differently, and I said, okay, let's look at this building blocks for digital transformation in TVET. What do we mean by digital innovation here? So this goes back to that slide I shared with you, how, time passes. We get different technologies, new digital technologies, which we know create new capabilities for, the way we learn, the way we teach, the workplace, but also societies in general. We could not have been having this session, the session we're having now, 5 years ago, could we? I'm sitting in a tiny island. I'm sitting in my house. I can hear the bells ringing in my, this church around the corner. You're thousands of miles away. We could not have done this without the technology we have at hand. But how can we go from digital innovation, digital acceleration, this transformation in the nature of what we do right now? Now, transformations, I heard the word several times. And it was Guillaume was doing his stuff with you guys. Transformation implies change. Somebody once told me that it's trying to get change to happen with governments, with policies, and particularly the education sector. It's almost like putting water on a stone, and you need to keep the water dripping constantly so that eventually something seeps on the other end, because that's the kind of resistance you're likely to find. And the resistance, I repeat, is not technological. The resistance is human. So even if I use the stone as an analogy, the idea that we need to accelerate and lead to a demand for acceleration. In other words, a demand means, back to those learners, how can you do something which resonates with young people, that instead of either doing nothing, get onto a TVET program? How can you get TVET organizations to maybe even go down the value chain to become more relevant to people? How can you as policymakers get the attention of people with budgets. These are real human problems, but we can talk about them in words which will resonate in a way with some of these reports, right? Many of which I've been responsible for. Digital innovation, digital acceleration, let alone digital adaptation, the new skills to enable people to adapt to and benefit from these transformations. But if you have to think about adaptation, and I think in terms of even what's happened with the internet in your part of the world, that Africa was one of those countries that when it came to adopting technology jumped, and like it became the mobile internet almost sometimes much quicker than it was in Europe, in the same way that I had access to broadband in my tiny country before my friends in London had it in certain parts of the world. So sometimes countries that are developing can make these leaps in ways by being swift, quick, agile, in ways that larger countries, so-called more developed countries, can't do it. And I'm speaking again from the basis of experience, what's happened in my part of the world. And we're saying what's happened in my part of the world, I'm talking about the Mediterranean as well, which is not necessarily deemed to be sophisticated within the European regime, okay? And then inevitably, having got digital innovation, acceleration, and adaptation on board, you will always have to come back to the holy grail of regulation and the policy environment. And in a way here, we're doing things in the opposite way, aren't we? We're talking to you, and you have some relationship with governments, with policymakers, and it is the obligation, I would say, of people in government to create a supportive environment for the development of new technology. And I guess that is why you are all there today. But it's also to create an environment for the promotion of skills education. Promotion implies communication. What will make or break this will be your ability to communicate in a meaningful way over the media of the choice of learners to make something happen. And inevitably, the interface with most people, young people, with all the globalization, localization happening, is still the phone. So that's another thing that you have to keep in mind. Not just those 10 targets, that celebrating your victories or even informing people about what you're doing. And even if you think, well, my audience is government, policymakers, unless you get the support of people way, way, way deep down in the value chain, it's going to be challenging. And I'm speaking about from experience, and I can share other case studies with you if you wish. Okay. So again, if you think in terms of this digital transformation and skills development as almost like a composite of things happening, of digital innovation, which is at the hub of what we know is technology. And we start getting into the business then of accelerating stuff, which then gets you to think about the future of work, the future of teaching, learning, education, TVET, call it what you like. And I guess this word I'm sure you've heard, which is Industry 4.0, is bandied about a lot. But if we want to go then outside that and we really want to accelerate that, the proof of the pudding, the acid test is, are we capable of creating new jobs? Is whatever it is we're doing with the technology we're providing, are we really capable of providing people, young people, with new skills they did not have before? Because if not, all of this stuff will crumble down. It was almost like a concertina. And in a way, where you are sitting from the outside looking in, the TVET landscape is still dependent on regulation and the policy environment. You know, most governments operate on the basis of the carrot and the stick. No, that's the way most politics works. That's what Gramsci had said in my part of the world. Okay, and that's the law, the power of the gun. I will fine you if you don't do this, or else what we're going to be doing is good for you. And I'm assuming that you will also have a key relationship with the labor market, for sure, the TVET organizations, for sure, The power you have is regulation. The power you have is setting policies. You have to do that with responsibility. But I would also suggest that you also have to do that with, how can I say it? Being able to get wins, quick wins. And we'll discuss this later. Okay? If there's any questions, please barge in. We've got plenty of time.
Mentioned, I mean, it was quite interesting how Alex was breaking into this process into 4 building blocks. And if you have any questions about this innovation process or transformation process, I think this is the right time to ask questions. Can I just check if any of us have any questions? Okay, so Alex, we have 1 question. Oh, 2 questions.
Voilà.
Thank you, Mr. Alex. The part I do not really understand is with regard to the regulatory policy environment. You just said that you did everything, but you were not able to create a regulatory policy environment, and I wanted to know why. What were the obstacles to this? Thank you.
Okay. Let me contextualize. When I said we were not able, I'm talking about Europe here. I would use my own country as a case study, if you wish, because most of you are coming from a national environment. It doesn't matter that I live in a place where there are 500,000 people. Most of the work that we did, and I'm going to use the work we did with credentialing and blockchain and stuff like that as an example, but also something else that we did. They were hailed in Gartner as models of best practice. And yes, I was driving them. So I will share with you the tricks that we used. And I'm not necessarily going to tell you that Europe is going to fail with its exercise. It's just that I am one of those people who keep on reminding the European Commission that just because you build technology doesn't mean it will get adopted. And when it comes to education, specifically in countries can do different things. So at some stage, if you're really going to have a union, like you have the African Union there, it really at some stage has to operate back to the carrot and stick I'm talking about. When, so real life thing, I mean, bear with me, it will take about 2 minutes, okay? In 2016, I had just written a policy document for my government here at the time. At the time, I was an advisor to the Minister for Education. I had a fairly wide remit, think of new things. And I could see that because, small countries, developing countries have nothing, right? So they're always looking at the outside to bring value in. And I could see that with technology happening, there was an opportunity because Malta was connected to the policy regulatory qualifications framework for Europe, that Malta could come up with a regime which would recognize online education at the same level as education which is delivered face-to-face. Okay? And I could immediately see loads of opportunities. One of it was, ironically, refugees. People who are arriving in my country and finding themselves here by accident, not by design, but then making it their country. And think of, the African continent, people migrating all the time, wanting to stay in one country, wanting to go somewhere else to improve their lives, to survive. Okay. And we came up with a model which could could get recognized by the EU. And I ended up at the MIT Media Lab in Boston. Supposedly, I went to talk to them about this thing. And it was the first time I'd heard this word called the blockchain. And it was a guy called Philip Schmidt who runs MIT Media Lab there for the education side. And he said, well, it was really interesting what you want to do in terms of accreditation of, recognition of people's skill sets, back to the TVET sector. He said, have you ever thought about doing something with this blockchain, with this decentralized technology? To cut a long story short, I went back to my country. There happened to be a particular time, Malta had the presidency for the EU. When I sat down with the minister, I said, look, there's this thing called the blockchain. I've just got to know about it. We're about to have a major summit in Malta about, and by the way, I know the guys at MIT Media Lab building these systems, and I think we'd go for it first. And literally the minister just said, look, time out. One, this blockchain stuff you're talking about, is it good for learners or not? Because otherwise I'm not interested. Two, what policy changes do we need to make? Three, can you run this? Yes or no? By September of that, I mean, literally within 2 months, I had got people there from all over the world, made a whole song and dance about this. We fixed the legislation. And we got to the stage that by the end of the year, okay, from a regulatory point of view, we were in line that credentials were being recognized, whether they were in paper format, whether they were in digital format, and whether they were notarized on the blockchain, in the same way that in my country, we recognize that online learning is at a par with blended learning or in situ learning, which is what you are doing here. Right now, this is a broadcast, right? That's all we're doing. But we could say it's a bit of a blended format. So from a small country perspective, we did achieve what I told you is very hard to achieve. But I had a couple of things to my advantage. One, access to the decision maker. Two, I was empowered to, when I said, you have to go, you know what your target is? In just doing this project, I ended up talking to data protection commissioners, people who told me you can't get it done. The head of the technology firm within government told me you can't work on decentralized technologies. We only trust Microsoft, for instance. You're breaking all the rules, we'll fire you. I don't even know what along the way, okay? But I was empowered because my head was on the line to get something done. Now, I'm looking at you in terms of the regulation people, that you do have the power of the regulation of the law to do that. And that's what I levered on, even though I wasn't even part of government. I was an advisor to the minister. You can, small countries or countries where you have access to decision makers can make amazing strides, which are not possible in supposedly more developed, more sophisticated environments, because there you have so many other checks and balances that you can't get anything done, because you will always be paralyzed by people saying no. And in a way, my primary interest in running this first, when Olivier first approached me, was because I do talk to my peers in other parts of the world, people saying you could potentially get something done in Africa like they did with mobile internet. You could potentially do something with TVET and digitalization, which has not been made possible in other countries, simply if they get their act together. Those are the words. I don't even know what the translation would be, in French or anything like that. But it is possible to get these things done, but a lot of things have to be in place. Access to decision makers, being able to convince people right at the very top that it's their project, not yours. I had to convince every single person, and I used to have a slide. I remember sharing this, many years ago in a presentation I made in Dubai, and I just literally mapped the network of people I had to engage with to get this project done. And at the end of it, I had put down human networks cannot be automated. You need human will to do this. And I guess that's why I started at the very beginning by telling you, if you're going to be the real champions of change, you're going to have to put your heads on the line. That's a long answer to what seems like a simple question. And I'm sorry about the story, but I think, that's how we learn, I think, from stories, okay? You can get, people on the same page. You need a lot of time, effort, and energy to do that, okay? Does that answer the...
Sorry, Alex.
Does that answer the question?
Okay. So we have one more question. Monsieur Checky? Okay. Hope in French.
Can you hear him? I cannot hear him. I cannot hear the speaker. I was saying that we thank Alex for his presentation. I want him to come back on the concept of Industry 4.0. He said that companies should participate in professional training. I think we are all aware of that, but we realize that this is not the case now. How does he see this participation of companies? How do we incentivize them? Thank you.
You may not like what I'm going to suggest. It's what we try to do here. And ironically, we used UK models to do that. We set up a National Skills Council. I wrote the policy paper for it. And the idea was that regularly, once a month, government.
Alex, sorry, could you just repeat what you've just said? I think there's some technical issues here.
Okay. I'm gonna try again.
Give me 1 second. Jose, could you check if everything is okay? Okay, Alex, you can could you answer the question?
To address this issue, and I'm hearing myself. We had used the UK model, so it's not made here, made in Europe, but we had set up a National Skills Council, and it was chaired by somebody who was not part of government. They had got an academic to do it. I was deputy chair for it, and we would get members of all of the representatives of the labor market, chambers of commerce, or whatever it is, to meet government, but to work jointly on plans and short-term plans. And it kind of worked for a while. Everything fell apart when the minister changed. Okay? As soon as there was a change in the Minister for Education, who was deemed to be the top person supporting this, the National Skills Council was disbanded within 6 months. So if you're going to tell me, how do you get to do this? Some of these structures, formal structures like you're meeting here, okay? I mean, it would be interesting to have one of these things with the labor market people over there with you, okay? We actually set up a formal forum which would meet once a month to talk about processes, projects, working up plans together. And it wasn't just a talk shop, but these things need to be championed, I repeat, championed from the very top. As soon as there was a new minister, I don't know what happens in your parts of the world. In my part of the world, as soon as they change in ministerial portfolios, the risk is that the new person coming in wants to do something new or doesn't see value in it. And to my horror, because I had moved on by that time, okay, I found out the National Skills Council got disbanded 6 months later. So what you can do, what you can't do. I think honest communication, whether you choose to do it bilaterally, whether you choose to do it the way politicians do it in my part of the world, preaching on Facebook, which I think is a disaster, whether you set up these national skills councils, you have to keep an open communication going on, including the problems, including asking things like what I just said, okay? Fine, you blaming the TVET sector because they're not rolling out the right kind of people, okay? So why don't you guys send a representative to at least, be part of the curriculum if you wanted to and validate that. But it got to very low level. And some of the discussions were quite animated, energetic, okay? You need to have proper fora to do that. How formal they're going to be, it depends on you, okay? I'm looking at Hanjan and time frames. So where are we, Hanjan? Just tell me again, okay, in terms of, I can go back to sharing some of my slides. I want to see what's important and what isn't. I might jump. Can you tell me how much more time I have before we start? And people might need to stretch their legs. Okay. Okay, I'm trying to, again, I can't hear you. 12:30, 8 more minutes. I'm gonna have to speed up. There's a lot of material I wanted to get through, and maybe we will do a partial SWOT. Let's see how we can get through. I think it's more important that you understand the kind of processes that I had in mind. We talked about the linkages between TVET and digital policies.
Policies are inferred.
In some
cases,
and
sometimes they're contrary.
What
I've just been explaining is an example.
Again, I'm hearing really in my ear. Let me go. I will speed now. Some quotes, actually. When I'm saying quotes, I tend to believe people in the field much more than I tend to believe people who have done a PhD on the matter. Okay. So what we had done when we had done this project for UNESCO and the ILO a couple of years ago is we spoke to people in training organizations, and Tom here, working for the ILO in Turin, said there's this hybrid marriage between technology, the formulation of policy and praxis. It is a real, veritable, reflexive relationship with things pushing together. TVET is becoming a complex sphere which encompasses technology ranging from MOOCs to the blockchain. It's vital that the discourse on TVET moves away from old debates, such as access. Policymakers are looking for more pragmatic solutions. We need to be pragmatic about technology if it's going to be put to good use. And again, this is my colleague Balaji Venkataraman, who's in Vancouver. He's Indian. A lot of the work he's done in his previous life was on, for example, getting financing for people in India when banks would not lend these people money. So he's very much somebody who goes into praxis. He says that today the digital world is the nerve center for our society. It connects different parts of the body. Indeed, it is the fuse throughout the body. Digitization also means surveillance or different notions of what constitutes a citizen's social credit or social right. Take China, where if you travel on a high-speed train without the proper ticket, your citizen's social credit score is decreased. This notion is based on advanced digitization. Digital TVET systems will work and fall in different cultural contexts on the basis of whether there is buy-in or otherwise from political leaders. I think there were questions about the fourth, industrial revolution and Industry 4.0. And again, I need to know how much I need to rush or not, okay? Industry 4.0 is emerging through a range of technologies that are blurring, in a way, the distinction between our physical space, our digital space, and almost our biological space. Okay, and Industry 4.0 transforms how products are designed, fabricated, used, and operated, as well as how they're maintained and serviced. So in a way, we're talking about major transformations to our physical world, our digital world, and our biological world. And we also think in terms of disruptive technologies. Some of these features we've talked about now. We've talked quite a bit about technologies which help with interoperability, okay, where you can have systems that talk to each other, maybe country systems that talk to other country systems. I will keep on saying that most of the problems with interoperability is not technological, but governance, semantic issues, legal issues. Industry 4.0 is related to virtualization. Again, this idea of the smart factory, for instance. Industry 4.0, and this is why I would again tell you that you should look at least what the blockchain means. It's not just about cryptocurrencies, but decentralization, the ability of cyber physical systems to make decisions of their own, and to provide locally thanks to technologies such as 3D printing, okay, real-time capability, service orientation, modularity. I mean, there's a lot of material about Industry 4.0, and there's a lot of material about what I'm going to speed through in about 5 minutes. I shouldn't be doing this, but I think you will get it. And I think if you read the report we had done, there's a lot of stuff about this. If you had to tell me what technologies are really driving digital transformation at the moment in TVET, one is access to computing power anywhere, ubiquitous computing. The second one is the ability to collaborate, your smartphone, even, heaven help us, the ability to communicate on WhatsApp like Hanjang and I are doing right now, collaborative technologies. The idea of extended reality, the ability to digitally simulate reality and integrate the digital with the physical world. Now, I don't know how widespread it is. I mean, you may have heard Mark Zuckerberg talking about he wants to, look at the metaverse. It's almost like gaming technologies become mainstream. And he's saying we don't keep on operating via the screen like we do, but we come up with some other space. Artificial intelligence, I'm sure people have bored you about this. I know I ran a whole working group for the Asia Europe Foundation earlier in the year, and where they got about 25 top people from Asia and Europe to discuss using AI for universities and TVET, but also AI for administration, and AI in what do we do with AI with the problem we have with data. And I've spoken enough about the blockchain. I think we can look at that at some other stage. And again, if you have to look at the way of we can transpose this to TVET and learning, things which can already happen now, the idea of distance learning and assessment, the ability to learn anywhere and anytime. Yes, you can learn via MOOCs. Yes, you can learn via FutureLearn and Coursera and all of these kind of things if you wanted to. The idea of simulation, the idea of flipped classrooms, those of you who come from more academic perspective. Mind you, it's very difficult to incorporate in practice. It's very difficult for me to tell my students, read this stuff before you come to the lecture and then we'll discuss it. We're still stuck, I repeat, in the Victorian model that people think that they're going to go somewhere. No way, it's what I'm doing now, no? Imparting knowledge and people receive it. Real, from praxis point of view, that's not the way it's supposed to help. Gamification is gaining traction. I heard something about copyright. Do not underestimate how many resources are based on an open source Creative Commons license. There's a lot of really valuable information if you only just Google it. And then the idea of personalization. We do already have technologies in place if we wanted to, that somebody who's not as smart as somebody else or needs help, or we want to have a more inclusive approach to the way we're imparting education, whether it's TVET or whatever it is, we can personalize education if we wanted to. So we can go from this idea of, self-study with textbooks to the idea of, passive learning if we wanted to, watch the video, go to the conference, read Alex's PowerPoints, what it could be, to collaborative learning, multi-way video conferencing, maybe what we're trying to do now, forums, wikis, group chat, me multitasking, looking at this screen. If you can see what I'm doing at the moment, I'm flipping between watching you, seeing what's happening there, to watching my slides, to flipping on WhatsApp to see if Hanjang is telling me it's time to shut up and let's get on to the next bit, okay, which we're supposed to be doing quite soon. So I think I'll skip this. Just bear in mind that we're in a very interesting stage at the moment, that we're going from the idea of artificial intelligence and robotics and virtual and augmented realities and the blockchain. Or if you really want to get into the industry side, I mean, look at all the climate change that we have to get our heads around. The idea of energy capture and storage and transmission and biotechnologies and neurotechnologies. To things which we can already see happening right now, the Internet of Things, 3D printing, advanced materials and nanomaterials, new computing technologies. The emphasis, I mean, if Africa wants to take a lead, the idea of greenifying learning, there's a real opportunity there where most of the world has failed, okay, let alone space technologies. These are disruptive technologies as far as people are concerned. And I think when we have to look at a specific country, when you have to look at your country, you really have to decide where you sit with this. And a lot of this is, are you just a laggard? You've got very limited potential for getting something done. Or have you already invested in some technology, so you're kind of stuck with those, and now how can you move to the next bit? Or do you have a huge high potential, because it's almost like you've got and I keep on going back to the political, that you've got a very inspired government regime, key people there, that you are empowered to make change, for instance. okay, all the way to, are you proposing to become the leading edge? Are you going to be in a situation that in 10 years' time, you will be telling people what to do, not listening to people like me? Okay. So again, there's many descriptions of what are laggards, what are legacy countries. I'm going to skip that because we don't have much time. I'm going to finish with this before we get onto the SWOT. This is a very long quote from one of the interviews that I personally conducted, in related to the digitalization of TVET and skill systems. I'm only going to focus on what's in bold that this person told me. He said, change in my country and TVET is happening organically. There's also a situation where people with academic qualifications are not finding work. So government is rolling out TVET as a means of trying to inspire entrepreneurship. Young people can benefit, in my country, he told me, from loan arrangements to try and stimulate an enterprise, self-employment, startup culture, and also try and encourage people in formal institutions also to rely on such skills. He said, not all of the processes in TVET organizations have been digitized. There's still an over-reliance on traditional tools, on traditional pedagogy, and in some cases, just paper practices. And he said the linkages between TVET and technology remains tenuous, weak, because of policy silo situations. Policymakers do not necessarily collaborate or even talk to each other within his country. And he said competition, however, among TVET institutions is coming about, whether we like it or not, as a result of the digitization process. So in some cases, he's saying, thank God for technology, because we're going to get something done, irrespective of the resistance there is, or because there are some people within the governance sector that get this and want to try and get something done. And he said, there are fewer online, more blended courses in my country. However, the regulators do have to be educated, and they are being encouraged by the labor market to update the quality assurance and accreditation practices. Digital can change the dynamics of teaching, but it also makes students more aware of what constitutes good teaching and what doesn't. Digital natives, our kids, have the tools to become more critical of the quality of what they're being served as TVET and the potential return of investment on the learning pathways, even if the learning that we're giving them, the teaching we're giving them, is free. So he says there may be transformations in teaching and sharing of experiences and securing overseas experts, like me, I guess, to actually teach a module of a course. There are opportunities for sharing of expertise. And it goes on. You're better able to improve on quality systems if you're exposed to better systems than the ones you are used to. That means knowing of better experiences, better processes, and better way of doing things. Most quality assurance regimes are still looking at traditional processes and then try and apply them to a digital environment. What else can I say? I'm going to skip. Because you might as well who this person knows, who was the king. He says, in sectors where there is limited expertise, a country can access these skills online with clear benefits to the labor market. This was Martin from the University of Applied Management in Ghana, which is one of your countries. Okay, now this is where we were going to get to the stage of getting to the next stage. And I was asking these questions. What is the commitment for change in your country? We do need to be strategic, whether we like it or not. And being strategic implies, where are we now? Where do we want to go? How do we get there? And I think we are at the moment at this stage. Where are we now? Where are we now? Besides being the song, which reminds me of David Bowie, there's also a song by John Lennon, it tells you how old I am. The song said, how can I go forward when I don't know which way I'm facing? And I guess that's why I think by focusing on where we are now, we can start to identify gaps and think of how we can address these gaps. That is why I think this process, that we need to go through right now implies research. There's quite a bit of it which has happened. Training, which is what's happening here. And I think it's a question to support you to accelerate digital transformation. We're at this stage now. We're at the stage of getting some foundational data. Have you noticed there's something called the Swot analysis, which is marked in orange here? So we can start to identify some of the key issues with any other market intelligence that we have, that you have about your countries. And all of this, in a way, needs to happen before we can get to these guidelines for a diagnostic assessment. So we may develop this toolkit, okay, to guide you, to help you conduct a detailed digital TVET and skills system situation analysis. So this is where we are. This is our point of departure. Assuming you want to do this, and I'm saying this not facetiously, a strengths and weaknesses, opportunities and threats analysis is something that can be done on a piece of paper. It requires honesty because it implies that we have to talk individually, collectively about what do we do well, what do you do well in your country regarding this whole digital TVET sector. What are we not so good on? Where do we need to improve? What opportunities are there if we look beyond our country or beyond what we can control? But also, what threats are there? Threats. Threats could be, exactly what happened in my country. There was a minister for education who was very innovative. He gets changed. What's the threat of that happening in terms of a key person who can make this work and not work? So what I had here now was literally some thoughts about strengths. What does your country do well? So here we would be thinking about the key resources, your capabilities, assets and partnerships that give you a competitive edge. And what I did by scraping reports, using my experience, whatever it is simply suggest that when you're doing a SWOT exercise, and this I think is what you're going to be encouraged to do now, is to consider some of these topics. And I'm listing them here, and they're going to be listing also, I think there's a printout which will help you to look at some of these things, okay? But I'm just listing these in front of you because these are things that maybe you should think about when you're looking about what's great about where you are right now, because believe me, you're going to be levering on what is great. And I've put in here things like anything from the governance sector, your digital infrastructure. Note, I have political will, access to decision makers, okay? State of regulations, what is the real commitment to, by the way, finding some money from somewhere? This is also hugely important. Who are your change agents? Who can make or break something? What's the level of your quality assurance regimes? What about some physical facilities? Can you use, even if you say, it's all dire in my country, is there somebody who's done something which is amazing that you can say, I could showcase this and say, you see this? We could get the whole country to do this if we all get our head together. And can I learn from what these people have done well? Okay. What's the CPD regime for your teachers? What is the real commitment to blended learning? What about the quality of your teachers? What is the learner demand for this thing? Because you may well be focusing on TVET when all of the young people in your country either want to move somewhere else, sadly Europe, where there are no jobs, okay? Or they want to go to grad school. What about the quality of your curriculum? What's the state of your internet? What about the cross-disciplinary environment that we were talking about? The first thing I heard today, and the need for interdisciplinarity. Is there a real appetite for this kind of thing? What kind of culture do you have? What is the organizational dimension? Here, you keep on hearing this from me till I die. What is the potential? What is the availability for a pilot project? So I mentioned, is there some training organization which is really working very well and can point to it? Or is there something which is happening, seems to be small scale, that you can actually lever on so people can be encouraged by that? So I've got the same approach, okay? So I don't necessarily want to go through all of these things because you're going to see them in the printouts that you have in front of you and also in the software that we're going to try and use, assuming you want to use this, because I think we should use a bit of technology even if it's uncomfortable for us, because at the end of the day, this whole thing is about using technology, putting technology to good use to transform mindsets. No, but here this becomes uncomfortable, perhaps, and you may not be comfortable talking about what's lousy in your country. Okay, difficult in your country in front of others, for all I know. Okay, so what does your country need to do to improve in terms of its resources, its talents, its assets, its capabilities that place your country at a disadvantage to others? Because whether you like it or not, we do operate in a global world, in a competitive world. Okay, so you might be looking at, is the lack of leadership? What's the digital divide? Is there political buy-in or isn't there? In fact, this is almost like the other side of the coin of some of the things I was suggesting you think about when you look at your strengths. Now, I repeat, this is not a prescriptive list. These are simply ideas to help you to start thinking. We are doing this, you are doing this, because unless you contribute to the guidelines, you're going to get guidelines which are absolutely useless for you. So that's why we want to try and encourage you to do this, so that I shut up and maybe I can help at a distance. Because some of these things are based on experience, I guess. And I think when you go and look at the opportunities, what are the potentials for growth and innovation in your country? And here I'm listing some stuff, which again, you will find in your printouts. And these are simply to get you to think. I think this idea of local partnerships and international partnerships, I know the EU, where I'm sitting, is at the moment putting a lot of time and money towards Africa. For whatever reasons, can you lever on some of those partnerships? And I repeat, can you learn from the mistakes of other regions to try and get something right in your region? What is the opportunity to recognize TVET and digital skills? Remember, we're talking about regulation? That's what I mean. Okay, so anyway, that's what I have to tell you. I have the same thing with threats. I think from this point onwards, okay, yeah, there was a final point about, what kind of data can you contribute? You can contribute validated data, good data, some data, your personal experiences, your gut feeling. I've marked in orange. I think anything goes except for guessing, I think, okay? Guessing might not be very useful, but anything that you have in your head which you think is validated or good, or some data, or your personal experience, even more importantly, even if it's your gut feeling, I think it would be useful. Now, this is where we have to rely on technology. If we want to use the technology, and the idea was that you'd open a browser like whatever you're using, whether you're using Chrome, whether you're using whatever it is you're using, okay? And if you type Flinga, flinga.fi, and once you open that, you can join, okay, with an access code, which again is on the screen over there, okay? You can also, if you wanted to be brave, just type in this URL here, okay, in front of you. Or you can even go towards the screen, and if you have a QR code, you can try and get that done, okay? And I'm, in the meantime, trying to open up Flinga from my side. And then maybe start and take you through
Alex?
what this blessed thing. Yeah, tell me.
Just give us 1 minute. I just want to make sure everyone opened the platform.
Just
All right. So can I ask everyone just to open a like Chrome or like a web page and type the link. And by the way, so Jose this morning he sent a link and a passcode to your email, so you can perhaps open your email. The email was sent around 9:44 a.m. So please check your email, click the link, and let me know if the link is not working.
On a envoyé un mail ce matin, vous avez le lien de cette plateforme-là avec le code. Donc cliquez ici sur le lien et ça va s'ouvrir dans le navigateur. Vous mettez le code et vous vous connectez.
Please let me know if you haven't received the link. If you haven't received the link, please raise your hand. Okay, perfect.
The screen.
I think people are opening the link now. Maybe another 30 seconds.
Okay.
Okay. When I can start, and I can go.
Oh, you don't have to. I think it's ready. Do you have the password? Great. So this is the password. Could you type it? FR.
Password.
Oui. Okay, perfect. Have you ready? Are we good? Perfect. Are we good? Yes. Ready? Are we ready? It's ready. Perfect. That's perfect. Ready. So Alex is going to explain now. We'll have to just type and then we'll see if it looks like.
You gotta refresh it.
It's not working. Oh.
Okay, just use Sarah forward it on me.
Okay. Oh, no. Could you just go back and then click the email? And click this email. Click the email. Yes, and then you just click the link. I think you're ready. Perfect. I think you're ready. Sir, are you good? Okay. C'est bon? Okay, perfect. Alex?
Yeah.
I think we're ready.
Okay. Now let me see if I can share the Flinger screen with you. Can you see my screen at all as I kind of...
Now we can see it.
Okay. So what you have in front of you is literally the SWOT, but using, first of all, I would get you to use your mouse to expand it. So you can see I can expand this so you can actually see some of the stuff which is written over here. So I'm just concentrating what's at the very top here. And these are just some instructions on how the SWOT on Flinger works. Flinger is nothing other than an interactive whiteboard. So what I was doing till late last night, I guess, was simply typing again some of this stuff which is here. So if you look at the strengths here, for instance, if you click on this and you open this, you actually get the slides, okay, related to strengths and weaknesses and opportunities and threats, okay, if you open up. And this is going to be a messy exercise. And as you can see, the first bit of mess is when people use the button on the left, which is the green button, and you start to draw stuff. That's not necessarily what I want you to do. And in fact, okay, I want you to look at the top of your screen, which is where you have things like squares there. Can you see that square? But you can also have text that you can write. Okay? So let's say I'm right at the top of my screen.
Alex?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Could you slow down? I think you're a bit fast.
Okay. So let me go back. Try and not this green button on the left.
even though it's what you should be doing. So for example, these are just
drawing that, again, somebody will have to remove at some stage. Let's not concentrate on that first. Let's concentrate on, let's say, writing a bit of text. So if you go to the very top and you type text there, you can also decide what the color of the text is going to be. Let's assume I'm going to use blue here. And let's assume that from an anonymous perspective, and by the way, why have we put down anonymous? Okay. And remember that you can keep on expanding the size of, of the screen so that there is enough space for your country. But let's assume that somebody wants to comment on some of these issues which are on the left-hand side, okay, but which are really also on your printouts when it comes to strengths, okay? Because the way this is organized, you've got strengths on one side, weaknesses on this side, on the right-hand side, and if I were to move down, you'll find a list of opportunities with, again, some of those things that we're talking about, okay, on one side there, and also, again, some of the threats. These are not prescriptive. These are simply things that you can think of, okay? So I can see that somebody's just put in a test there. Now, inside that box, you can also write text if you wanted to. You can also write text like, let's say, I think, let me say, okay, we have an inspired head of QA, okay? And I can just put that. Have you seen that now? And let's say that somebody from the Gambia thinks that that's one of the things that they have in Gambia. Now, another thing which can happen very annoyingly is that if you push things too quickly, you get a link like this, and things get very complicated. You can delete that link by simply clicking and, again, removing that link over there. But you need to click on one of the names. Now, all we're looking for is, as you get used to this, and you will get, first you will, draw things instead of writing text. And sometimes you will eventually get used to writing things in text as proper text. And sometimes we'll write things in blocks and you don't want to. There is a delete button, okay, that you can delete stuff that you've actually put in, okay? And again, I will leave it up to you to mess around with this. And in fact, I'm actually going to stop sharing my screen for the time being. Okay, and my suggestion right now is that I am going to go and watch what you're doing. If I can clear up some of the mess, what I mean is here's some of the speakers. I will do that. And how much time are you allocating this?
Alex?
An hour?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Do you want to have a reporting back session? I think that's a...
You know what? Let's do this properly.
Yes, right?
People need an hour to go to the fourth quadrant.
Okay, so we have about an hour.
I would much rather we use our session tomorrow. Once this has finished. That maybe you and I this evening go and look at some of the material that has been produced, and then try and make some sense of it tomorrow morning.
Okay, great. So I'm going to give participants about an hour to just work on this SWOT analysis, and then we'll have a report back and analysis tomorrow morning.
Correct.
And
it will be it will be between what I saw, what people think, and how does this go?
All right, so then from now on, Jose and I are going to just walk around, just check every table understood the instructions. And if they encounter any technical issues, then we'll try to solve it.
And you get WhatsApp.
Yeah, well, and then for the next hour, so each group will have some time, spend some time discussing those strengths, weakness, opportunities, and challenges. And as you can see in Flinga, Alex put some elements per section, as well as the country section. So you can have a discussion with your own country representatives and come up with some ideas based on those elements. Try to type those inputs in Flinga, and we'll just walk around and see if it's working well. Does that make sense? I'll take it as a yes. All right, so the time starts now. You have about an hour to work on this exercise.
Donc c'est ça, comme elle explique, que je le dis aussi en français. Donc comme l'a expliqué Onjon, je le
As she explained, I'll say it in French. As you can see the platform, you have 4 parts on the display, and for each of the 4 parts you have the countries. So when you have weakness, opportunity, threats, or strength, you put it under the country, and under each column you have a list of proposals that are made to give an idea of what you can consider as strength, weakness, opportunity, or threat. Either you use the proposals, what is proposed, or you give ideas. So you select text. If you look up, you have to select text. And then you can type in, and you have it under the name of your country. So these are items to guide you. You have about an hour to work on it.
Non, pour le Burkina, voilà. Ça, c'est une idée, donc peut-être que c'est au niveau de TVET Governance, vous mettez ça. Sinon, ça peut être autre chose. Attends, revenez comme ça, là. Voilà, c'est ici. C'est ici. Texte. Vous saisissez ça, la force là, la faiblesse, vous saisissez là. Ça va donc venir sur l'espace et vous portez ça, vous déposez sur Burkina. Ça sont des idées. Ça sont des idées seulement qu'il a énumérées. Ah, c'est des idées seulement. C'est pas qui vous allez prendre ça. Mais ça peut aussi correspondre à votre... Voilà. Ah, sorry, I'm coming. Voilà, donc ici...
Elle a des forces, elle va en dessous de Mali, non, le pays?
Bon, non, force, c'est pas... Si c'est une force, il faut écrire c'est quoi une force pour le Mali. C'est pas une force, peut-être le système est très bien structuré. Bon, vous écrivez ce qui... Voilà.
Existence d'une politique.
Voilà.
Existence d'une politique.
Exact, oui.
Existence d'une politique numérique, information.
Ça va aller dans l'espace, l'espace là, vous portez ça, vous déposez sous votre pays. Vous déposez sous le pays, sous votre pays. Voilà, Sainte. Et qu'est-ce que c'est Sainte? C'est ça qui est venu, je pense. C'est petit, non? C'est petit, attends. Oui, ajoute un peu. On voit tout ce qui est sur Mali. Ce sont des forces que les femmes maliennes et l'Amérique de prendre. Pour la faiblesse, pareil. Vous allez passer sur cette faiblesse. Dans la zone des faiblesses, vous verrez Mali. Quand vous avez saisi une faiblesse, vous mettez là-bas aussi, vous mettez sous le Mali. Et ça, ce sont des propositions ce sont des propositions de faiblesse qui ça peut correspondre à votre cas, comme ça peut ne pas correspondre, mais c'est aussi pour vous donner les idées. Je me suis perdu. Non, tu n'as pas perdu, tu es dans l'endroit. Tu n'as pas perdu. Une force au Mali, comme assez rapidement, pas réfléchi comme ça. Mais ça, c'est une force. Tu l'avais dans la partie force. Essayer de corriger la non, c'est bon. Le problème, c'est bon. Où mettre ça? C'est simple. Lui, il a donné des exemples. Ce que c'est en anglais, je suis en train de regarder là où il y a, parce qu'il y a force et faiblesse. Force et strength. On va voir. Voilà, on est sous la pluie. Voilà. On va le poser comme ça là. Où est la faiblesse? On met la zone ici, la faiblesse. Parce que la partie ici, c'est la faiblesse. What weakness? Voilà. La force, voilà. Je vais la mettre dans la force. Avec la main, ça, Mali. En bas, maintenant, dans l'autre côté, en bas, on a la force faiblesse, il y a opportunité, menace. En bas, là, on va la place. C'est bon? Merci. Oui. Merci beaucoup. Mais moi, je n'ai pas reçu aucun document. Après, tu m'envoies ça par mail. Mais tu expliques déjà, donc c'est bon. Oui. Comment le valider? C'est bien validé. Quand tu as posé la c'est bon. Oui. Ça s'aligne mais il a dit qu'on peut aussi enlever les liens là si on veut. Tu peux enlever les liens qu'est-ce que ça fait? Voilà, c'est ce que je fais. Voilà. Avant de mettre voilà. Donc de son côté, il va voir tout ce qu'on a mis sur Mali. Pour la Guinée, il va voir tout ça de son côté. On va analyser. D'accord.
Donc, à ce moment, on va faire en sorte que chacun peut donner son idée.
Chacun peut son idée.
On va dire.
Chacun donne son idée. C'est le Mali. Là, c'est ce qui est au Mali. Donc, c'est force, faiblesse, opportunité en bas. On va dire tout ça là. Il n'y a pas menace là-bas. Tout est là. C'est un... Ça c'est force, non? Voilà. Il y a 4 espaces. Ici c'est fort, là c'est faiblesse, ici c'est opportunité, là c'est menace. Voilà, oui, il y a 4 espaces. Voilà. Et maintenant, si tu viens ici en bas, c'est opportunité, là-bas c'est menace. Là-bas c'est quoi? Menace. Menace, voilà. Force, opportunité. Force, faiblesse, opportunité, menace. Voilà. Are you okay? Yeah, thank you. You are already too far.
I think I'm still on speaker mode. If I can suggest that if you get time looking at strengths, swap to weaknesses, and look at the other components, it's the way the brain works. And there's no linear way of doing it. It may help seeing what other people are doing. I understand that the technology looks clunky or even childish. This is the equivalent of putting poster stickers on the wall. On the other hand, we need to understand what these technologies are and what the technologies are if we are going to be change using technology. And this is a very basic kind of technology.
Donc vous, pour les maintenant, vous pouvez beaucoup insister sur l'instabilité de la piste. Dans cette région. Tu as avec les forces?
So, please, we are not doing one as Liberia.
Yeah, it's okay.
Yeah, no, but we are observing ours is not appearing in the box like this. What's the issue?
In the box? Yes, you can make it appear either in the box or not in the box. It doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter.
Yeah, it doesn't matter. You have just choose here, choose text, it will not appear in the box. You see?
Oh, if you choose square, then
You choose square, it will appear in the square. Okay. But from inside, you will see what you have.
Wow,
yes. No, just give to her. Are you talking about the form?
The COVID test, no, the COVID test.
The cover, no, give to her.
Okay. But we don't know her.
Anything we see that way, let's go back. Go back on square.
Either square or text, you will see it from the side.
Go back to the square. Go back
Quand tu fais un nom, tu fais scène. Tu fais scène. Ça va venir. Non, ça va venir ici dedans. Donc, seulement que ça vient souvent petit, comme voilà. On a ici le passé. Pas capable. On écrit, et puis tu n'as pas envie de faire un peu. Je vais écrire ça pour le mot après. Je vais essayer. On est là, c'est pas que c'est. Ça, c'est quelqu'un d'autre qui travaille. On va regarder ça. Les gens sont tous une chose. C'est qu'il y a beaucoup de personnes dans les postes là. Tout est là, regarde, en bas là. En bas, regarde, voici les espaces. L'espace maintenant c'est ça ici en bas. Bon, l'idée c'est ici. Voici l'opportunité. Donc, allez, madame. L'opportunité. C'est en bas là-bas. Bon, attends, ça va ah, tu as écrit ici? Non, pas du tout. Tu as écrit, attends. Il écrit seulement force. Écrit n'importe quoi. Non, écrit n'importe quoi. Voilà ça, non? Voilà, c'est qu'il n'y avait pas de place. Il n'y avait pas de place. Voilà. Tu vois que comme c'est moi qui ai écrit là, je peux le bouger, il m'obéit. Tu vois, non? Mais si je pense que quelqu'un d'autre a fait là, il va rentrer pour là-bas, c'est pas moi qui ai mis ça. Maintenant, on peut supprimer. Maintenant, supprime d'abord ce qui est mis là, c'est rien du tout. Je dirais, voilà, tu écris ce qui est bien, tu le colles, tu vas mettre sur le col. Tu le mets en bas de ton suivi.
Well, I think everyone's kind of understanding how it works. So because we have a very limited time, once you spend certain time in one section, like strength, and I think it's time for you to move on to the next section, sections like weaknesses, challenges, and opportunities, so that you can actually cover all those different 4 areas. And please, because sometimes it's not so clear, because we have a country sections. But I see some countries are kind of like dragging their inputs to someone else. So try not to cross that line. But we'll just continue walking around and see how everyone is doing.
Donc, ne restons pas uniquement dans une seule section. On a en tout 4 sections. Faisons l'effort de remplir.
Please make the effort to fill in the 4 sections when on opportunities, strengths, weaknesses, and threats as well. So please fill in the 4 sections.
You know how to do it now?
Yeah,
Yes.
Okay. We tap it, then it goes in the area and take it under. Yes, I drag it under your country. Tu as pris quoi? Tu as pris quoi? Tu as changé la forme de... Tu as pris quoi? Ok, c'est bon.